wonderful to be with you today, and we have a very special friend that we already have before, which was Keren Pryor. Thank you, Keren, for coming. Keren comes from South Africa, and she made Aliyah in 1988, which is a while ago already. And so she's nicely established now in Israel. She went in America for a while, but she came back. And the thing is, what is the wonderful thing, she has a great website, which is called hisisrael.com. And there is a lot of things about the Hebrew language, about the land, and about the people. They are all connected together, which is very important. And today we are going to speak about these things, and we're going to speak about time. Do we have time in our hands? If we have time in our hands, it means that we are free, and we're going to speak about these kind of things today with Keren. So Keren, here we go. We are together again. This is wonderful to be with you.
I'm so happy to be back with you, and it's always a joy to be talking about these kind of things which are very, very important, yes, I believe, and especially for the time we are in. So you're right, that time is the key factor here in what we will be talking about.
And so you can even use few little words really in Hebrew, because we are learning. We do a language segment at the end, and people know already few things, and we can review it after, so it's wonderful to be able to use that. So here we go.
Well, you start.
Chodesh, the new moon. Can we start with that first?
Sure. I mean, we can start anyway. Although I'd rather, I think, start with the day rather than the month.
Okay.
Because what is the very first thing in the Bible that God calls holy, that He sanctifies? And if we look at that in Genesis, the very first thing He declares as holy is the seventh day, which is the Shabbat. So right from the very beginning, He's giving us the very clear indication that time is important. He created in days. And then He called...
For us, because He didn't need that.
No, He's outside of time. So already, though, He was putting His timetable in place right from the very beginning with Shabbat and with the week, so that we can... and if you think of sanctifying, He sanctified that day, that it's almost like He's saying He wants us to sanctify time, to see it as something precious. It's a gift He's giving. And that our, you know, we have so many sayings in English about, are we saving time, wasting time, killing time? And He doesn't want us to kill time or waste it.
It's precious.
It's precious, and He wants us to redeem time, to somehow redeem it so that it's a positive thing in our lives, and it's and He's very involved with that.
Now, maybe can you speak also a bit, because like we have very much a Greek way of looking at the Bible, because we've been used to that. But now there is really a great move with bringing us back to the Hebraic way of looking at the Bible. How is it in the Hebrew way of looking at things, even in the Bible?
Yes, I mean, definitely. It's the day starts in the evening. It says because it was night and day, night and morning that made one day, and so now that could actually link us through with Rosh Chodesh, because each month begins the evening before the day. So you have Erev, like on Shabbat, you have Erev Shabbat, and Shabbat starts in the evening.
That's it.
On a Friday evening.
You're right. Because when we arrive here, sometimes it was tricky when we wanted to go to do some shopping, very practical things, and suddenly we arrive too late because the day of like a Shabbat or a holiday is going to start. So the day before, in the afternoon, they will close the shops, and we will be like, oh no, I can just go to do some shopping. No, it's too late. So now we
have to
know.
remember that. Yes, it's true, because everything, and it is a beautiful part of it, because whether it's Shabbat or whether it's one of the festivals, the holidays, you can actually feel everything slowing down, everything quietening down, and before this beautiful peace, the shalom of Shabbat actually comes, it's almost tangible, like a mantle coming over the whole city just quietens down, and it's beautiful.
Especially in Jerusalem.
Especially in Jerusalem, yes. It's really, you can literally feel it coming down, and just that peace settling on the whole place. I mean, where do you see a city, just the capital city of a country, just closing down and quietening down, and this beautiful shalom or peace coming over it. So it's precious. But I think an important thing, you said seeing things in the Hebraic way, just looking at the whole festival cycle. It started with Shabbat, but then you get the whole festival cycle, and you get the monthly cycles. It's all a cycle. I think part of what God is restoring, obviously in Israel with the Jewish people, but with all those who have a heart for God and are wanting to walk in His ways, and all over the world, it's amazing how He's restoring so much of the Hebraic heritage that has been lost. And a very important element of it, I believe, is the Hebrew calendar. And people say, well, aren't all these feasts, aren't those Jewish feasts? And you say, no. What does it say in the Bible? It says,
Feast of the Lord.
Feasts of the Lord. These are His feasts. It's as if He, from the very beginning, put His timetable in place. And it was like a framework for these appointments that He wanted to make with His covenant people. So if you're in covenant with God, if you've come to know the God of Israel through Messiah, I mean, then you should be fitting in with His time, because He made the appointments. And now it's up to you, up to us, whether we're going to keep the appointments, meet Him at those appointed times.
And I like the name is like Moed, which is like, it's like a rendezvous.
Yes,
it's a rendezvous with Him.
Oh, that sounds good in French. A rendezvous.
Yes,
with
it's a rendezvous with our Creator.
Yes, very, very special. And the more you look into it, the more you start seeing the importance of these feasts, the more you discover in them, the meaning in them, and why each one has a very special reason for Him meeting with us. And then once you start working with that, you see, time, you have two forms of time. You have time that is chronological, which of course we know about. We celebrate our birthdays, anniversaries, whatever, and we know time marches on, and each year we're getting older. But so you do have chronological time, which we count in years. But that's natural physical time. Physically, you are going forward, you're getting older, you're moving with time. But with spiritual time, it's not from A to B. It's not. It's actually a spiral. It's cycles. So you're either spiraling up, or if you stop moving in that spiral, you start sliding down. So you're going down further away from God, as it were. And I found an interesting verse, actually, which I've made a note of here. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 13, which promises, "And the Lord Adonai will make you the head and not the tail, and you shall go upward only, and not downward." So there's that little clue about the spiritual time. It's a cycle upwards or downwards. Yeah. But it says you shall go upwards only if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, being careful to do them. So this was Moses, of course, talking to the Israelites once they left Egypt.
Which is interesting, because when you want to be close to the Lord and stay in connection with Him, you feel that you are walking, you are learning new things, I mean, it's like a relationship with your husband or with your children. It's like it's changing all the time because there is a connection. So it's renewed, it's new, and so we can have that with our God.
Amen. It's wonderful, actually, and it's, in Psalm 23, everybody knows Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me in
green pastures.
No. He
Oh,
leads
in
me
the
in
quiet.
paths of... Now, most English translations say he leads me in paths of righteousness. In a path, and he leads me beside green still waters and the green pastures, But
I was already in the green
you
pastures.
were already wanting to be in the green pastures, really. But in that, where it's translated, he leads me in paths of righteousness, which is also good. But the Hebrew word there is ma'aglim, from the word cycles. It's ma'aglim. He leads me in cycles of righteousness, showing us that this time that he's leading us through is it's cycling, it's spiraling upwards, or if you don't move with them,
you go back,
you slide down again, and you have to start again. But it's a process of growth and growing and renewal, like you said. You know, in a physical journey, we were just talking about going on safaris in Africa, which I've just come back from one, which was amazing. But when you're doing on a physical journey, it's the scenery around you that changes. You're watching and you're seeing, and there's all new things. The scenery is changing. But in a spiritual journey, as you're going, it's not the scenery, it's you that's changing, because we're always aiming to grow and to grow in our relationship with God.
Like, yes, and like, you know, I think in the Bible is to say also, like, when a man know his wife, is like no. And like even with the Lord is the same. Is not just being with him. It's like there is a knowledge of his character, of who he is, and your faith becomes so much stronger and established, and you can help people around you if you are strong to show the way. And
Amen. It is. It's all part of this calendar. It's a process of learning and growing, and it's renewing, that renewal, like you mentioned. So we have that opportunity every day. Every week with Shabbat, every month with Rosh Chodesh, and then all during the...
Maybe you need to say also, when they have Shabbat, is a time to have meals with the family, to stop all the action and all of that outside and business and all these things. But they take time also to read the Torah. They take the time to be in the Word. And not because they read it, like the Jewish people read it every year, and they read like the first 5 books. So they go back to the story of Abraham, Genesis, Abraham, Noah, Sarah. Abraham, Sarah, you know, I mix them a bit. But it's like they really deepen their knowledge. Do you understand what I mean?
Well,
because
you see,
it's so
and you know
important.
what, that's also called the Torah cycle. You have the festival cycle that you go through the year. Then you have the Torah cycle, which at the end, at Simchat Torah, which is in the month of Tishrei, the 7th month after Sukkot. There's a huge celebration, and the people are dancing with the Torahs, kissing the Torah. It's just a loving of the Word of God. And then the Torah scroll is rolled all the way back to the beginning again. And then you go through the cycle. And you know, I don't know how many cycles of the Torah I've been through, and every time there's just new things. They're special, and it's just you learning more and more and more. You never come to the end. But let's just get back to, you talked about freedom. It's like there's a renewal, and there's a freedom that comes into it. And I was just thinking of when Moses redeemed the children of Israel out of Egypt. What was the first commandment that God gave? Now it was, before it had been a family, there'd been a lovely family relationship with God, with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. But now, for the first time, the children of Israel are being called a nation. God calls them his people and makes a covenant with them. And there's the first commandment that he gives them.
Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh. It's related with time. And we need to say
Rosh Chodesh is the new month.
Yes.
Now, does it start in January?
No.
Okay. Because again, it's like we are used to use January to December.
Yes.
So
the first month of the Hebrew year is actually called Nisan, which is around Pesach time, because that was the first festival that was celebrated, the Exodus. And God said, this will be the first month for you. It was at that time called Aviv. Why? What is Aviv?
is spring.
It's springtime, and it was a springtime. And what does spring symbolize? It's a season of
like a new
renewal. There's life from the dead. It's like all this life bursting forth. So the Israelites were, as it were, coming out of the grave of Egypt, coming into this new life. And God said, you must remember this and set this as the first month of the year. He was putting that in place. Why? Because from Pesach, from Nisan, all the following months would make a framework for the festivals, so that they would always fall on that time related to Passover. And it's always a full moon. It's always during a beautiful time of the month. And so it was just showing how important this was to God.
Yes, and not only that, very practically, because I like to see the thing practical. So when they were leaving Egypt, they could see
where
in
they were
the night and the day.
Yes.
I mean, they didn't have the lamp that we have on our streets, and they needed that.
They needed the
So
full moon.
it's just amazing how I love that. It's like the very practical thing that God gave.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's true. And that's why it's so lovely at Passover when you have the full moons and, all the festivals. You have the Sukkot, you have what's even people call the harvest moon, because it is a harvest festival, but it is also the moon of Sukkot. So he put in place these appointed times. Now we also call them Chagim, nachon? Which is
holidays.
Are holidays or festivals. But did you know that another word connected to that root is the hands of a clock?
Ah.
Yeah, also tying in with time. And in Hebrew, they're called mechagim. And so you say mechugei hasha'on, the hands of the clock. So that's point making, that moments in time are these festivals.
We were speaking about that. We love to speak with the people that there is always root words, and they do so many names. But they are always related in one way or another.
And they're given a little extra meaning and a little deeper
it.
connection with the meaning. And, so I'm just thinking of those Israelites that came out, and they were coming out of slavery. And again, it was spring, it was Aviv, Nisan, and it was a time of freedom for them.
Yes.
And a time of learning. Now, they had to see who were they. They were not slaves any longer, because slaves, and God was giving them the responsibility for time. He said, now you take notice of time. You take responsibility for how you use your time. I mean, they're slaves. They were told what to do. There was no calendar. It was just, they saw the sun come up, the sun go down, and it was just hard labor and work and slavery. So they had no control over time. They had no responsibility for time. They even had no voice, Slaves don't have a voice. So I often think of it, even the complaining in the wilderness was a good thing, because, I mean, at least it was like now they were learning to walk as a free person. And a slave couldn't complain to his people, to his masters. So even their complaining was part of their growing up. Yeah, so time is for growth and for change.
Now, you are speaking, because I want to say also practically for the people when they read the Bible, all in the New Testament, because they don't speak too much about months and things like that in the New Testament. So when you read something, like for example the fast in Zechariah, the third month, the fourth month, we have to think this is not February or March. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's not the Gregorian calendar. That's
the
it.
Biblical calendar.
Exactly.
Right.
So when you read your Bible, you have to think when this is written, and if you do some research, you go back with the Hebrew calendar, which starts in Nisan, which is around April, May, is springtime.
April, right.
So when is the end? But so you have to say, we have also the end of the year around September.
Yeah, and so Rosh Hashanah is in the time of, well, we call it, that's the start of the year, but it's this. People get very confused with this
That's
because
it. So
Nisan is
yeah.
the first month that God put in place. And yet when you come to the 7th month, now 7 always indicates a special holiness, like Shabbat. So when you get to the 7th month of Tishrei, you get all the high holy days, as they're called, the holidays of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchat Torah, and it's called Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. Why? When you say, well, didn't the year begin in Nisan, in March, April with Pesach? And this is, so the spiritual year starts there, but the Tishrei is the start of like the
agricultural?
It's very tied in with agriculture, so it helps the farmers know because that's the final harvest. But it's also like the, what could you call it? The secular calendar year.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's also
of Israel.
Of Israel, yeah. So that is like the Jewish calendar year, as it were.
Or even the earth calendar, I would say, because they say that Tishrei, at the 7 months, will be the birth of the earth, isn't it?
Oh, they say, yes. If you go back, they say that's connected with Adam and Eve, with the creation happened then.
That's it.
So that's why the years are counted from
that.
the creation.
So you have to understand, so it's like 2 calendars. But you're right, Nisan is what we read in the Bible, which will be like the spiritual
journey,
the spiritual journey, exactly.
The growing, yes.
And it will be the calendar of the kings, because when we read all the story of the kings, when they put that's it, the years and all of that, it will go with that.
Can I quickly say,
yes,
looking at the Hebrew, that Shana is year, and it comes from the root Leshanot, which means to change. Chodesh comes from the root Chadash, which means new. So even in those names, it's saying that the year and the month are times of renewal, times to change, to grow, and to go forward. Yeah.
And Chodesh, I think something that I love also in the months is like, it's done with the moon. So
it's a lunar calendar.
Yes. Yes. So again, for me, when I started to learn about it, it was like there is this renewal. It's like if something goes wrong, you can always go back on your feet, go back on your feet and say, okay, if it doesn't work this way, God has a way and we can try another way. Do you understand? It's like there is no impossibility.
Right.
There is always possibilities. And if you go to the bottom, you're going to go up again. Do you understand? And I think there is this hope that I really took inside me, saying, okay, if I can't do this way, we can do it another way.
God will reveal, He will shine His light on something else. So the moon is very connected with reminding us of that. It fades away, but then it fills up again.
Exactly. Now, if you want to know more, you can go also on Keren's website, which is hisisrael.com. And Keren, thank you for coming. I think I want to do some more program on this subject, but also on other subjects, because we need to connect with this Hebraic way of thinking. And I know that you really enjoy that. And it's to make us understand the Bible more, and like it's something real. Keren, thank you for coming, and we will see you next time. Bye. Hey, Shalom. Do you remember what was the very first commandment that God has given to the Jewish people as a nation? Do you remember when it was? Was it like, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength? Or was it, I am your God, I am the Lord your God? Or was it, love one another? It's none of that. The very first commandment that God has given was the commandment of Rosh Chodesh, which is the new month. Isn't it interesting? Let us read. This month shall be into you HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. The beginning of months, Rosh Chadashim. So we say it again. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. So this month will be for you, Rosh Chadashim, the head of the month. So isn't it interesting? God suddenly is saying, still in the land of Egypt, which is the land of slavery, saying now you are going to be free, I'm going to redeem you from Egypt, and now you need to have your own calendar. Because when you are a slave, you don't have time. But when you are free man, time is in your hand, and you need to know what to do. So God gave the ability, said to them, create a calendar. And they created a calendar which start during the time of spring. And the first month is Nisan, and is the month of redemption, which is when we celebrate Passover. Okay? So, another thing, because the name in Hebrew, do you remember, we look at them and it's very important. Chodesh, which is the month, is the same root than Chadash. And do you remember what Chadash means? Chadash means new. So when we speak about a new month, it's like it's a new cycle, it's a new renewal. You've done something right, good. You've done something wrong, okay, we start again and we do it right. This time, we learn from our mistake. Sometimes we learn more about our mistakes than when we are perfect. So we look at two words this week, Chodesh, which is months, and also Chadash, which means new. And this is what we've learned again this week. See you next week. Bye. Thank you, Keren, for coming. This is wonderful to have you speaking about the months and about the calendar, biblical calendar. And I hope that you really enjoy this, and we will carry on doing some more digging in the Bible, and we'll see you next time. Bye.